Welcome back to the Mentor Show, which offers quick lessons packaged within minisodes for busy founders and startup leaders like you. I'm Adel, and I'm being mentored live and unscripted by Ed, who's built, sold, turned around, and scaled startups all the way to the New York Stock Exchange. He's based in the US, a developed economy, and I'm based in Dubai, a hub within an emerging economy. And we compare notes. This is real talk, no scripts, no theory. Let's get into it. How does the grooming take place? How do these people get selected? Are they a group of people or an individual? How does it usually work? From a family business point of view, it's a bit easier to explain this. I'm the owner and I founded the company. I'd like to find my successors as the company grows, as I'm preparing for my retirement, or also as a succession planning in case something happens to me. I don't see any of the C levels that I have today being able to replace me and become the CEO. So I have to bring someone new. How do I groom them? What's the usual approach? Do we pick them straight from business schools, or do I find someone from the family that I bring them in because it's my business, I'm a majority shareholder, or look for somebody within the company?
Well, that's a great question with an infinite range of answers. You can do all of the above. You can look outside, you can look inside the family, inside the close circle of friends and acquaintances that you know. I think in developing and sustaining a successful team, a leader and their advisors need to be just really clear what it is that the business needs in terms of a skill set for where the business is today. And I think that in order to keep people on board, even though they may be disappointed because they're not going to be the de facto successor, you have to communicate clearly what it is you're looking for, both at a group level and to the individuals that are involved. Real estate land play to a real estate technology play, we need people that have and understand and get excited by technology, building SaaS products or whatever the issue is. And if you do this soon enough, you can suggest to people that might be interested but don't have the tools, here are the things you can go and learn and get good at, really good at. I'm going to keep my options open and look outside. And I want to find somebody that's taken a company from where we are today to 10 times our size. And if you've never taken a business from 1 to 10, and you can call it $1 to $10, a million to 10 million, 10 million to 100 million, whatever the scenario is, that's not something you can learn overnight. So at a certain level of scale, you're probably going to go outside. And I think you and I talked about this in our last session casually, which is if I look at the Coors Brewing Company here in Colorado, that was a company that was started by Adolf Coors decades and decades and decades ago. And the Coors family has always had some kind of senior position within the business, but the kids had to learn under outside talent. So it was not just automatically assumed that, the grandson was going to be CEO. The grandson had to go learn every aspect of the business, how the beer got made, how it got packaged into bottles and cans and kegs, how the product got shipped to market, who the relationships were with the key distributors. Until all that was done, they were just another employee, a special employee, obviously, but they were learning the business on the ground. And many of those children of Adolf Coors went to business school, but they learned under outside expertise. One of the outside experts that came in as president of Coors Brewery at one point in time was the former CEO of Frito-Lay, if my memory serves me well. So what does Frito-Lay make? Chips, crisps. But Frito-Lay is also part of Pepsi-Cola. So the gentleman they brought in knew about fast-moving consumer goods, consumer packaged goods, the beverage industry, all of the logistics that go into that. And, he took Coors from a certain level to something much larger, trained a number of the family members, and those family members now run the business.
We watch all of these TV shows with all the drama between the family members. So, I keep on imagining them fighting and plotting against each other. But there is always one clear motivation for the founder or the CEO. Created something great, and they either are looking for loyalty, absolute loyalty, or they're looking to pass this on to people that they love.
Yeah, the thing I would encourage anyone who has a strong interest in seeing how businesses evolve over time, I actually kind of like the Coors story, mainly because it's a company in my backyard that I'm very familiar with whenever I drive past their headquarters in Golden, Colorado. But what I would say is if you go to the Coors Brewing website today, one of the big changes people will see is it's now called Molson Coors, because many, many years ago, Molson's brewery out of Canada bought the business. Right now, the brand is still there. The product is still made the way the product was made before. But what's interesting is if you look at the leadership team, there's no more Coors in there. That family name is not there. Now, the family, I believe, still owns a pretty significant piece of the business. But my point in the story is that this is a company that has evolved over a very, very long period of time from a sole proprietor who emigrated to the United States, and all he wanted to do was make beer. And as the business grew, beer was continually the core product of the company. But over time, one of the things that was interesting is when beer was delivered to a bar in the form of a keg, one of the ways that the beer was dispensed was through a tap. And inside the tap was a piece of ceramic material that made the beer pour a certain way. So it was very pretty and enticing. And from that, if I'm hearing the story correctly, Coors decided to create a division called Coors Ceramics. And so it expanded. It went from beer, but it added on a complementary product. That piece of the business got really, really good at building ceramic widgets, and it became a business all by itself. Right. So over time, as the business got bigger and bigger and bigger, Molson's of Canada said, gosh, if I'm going to consolidate brands in the beer market and expand my scope of influence in beverage, who can I go acquire? It could just as easily have been Budweiser that bought Coors or pick any other large brewer. But Molson's won that bet, and now they have a bigger, better company as a result.
This is amazing. Thinking about these scenarios, because again, these apply not only to family businesses, but also to regular tech startups.
Yeah, interestingly enough, just as a sidebar, I'd say the company Coors Ceramics is now called Coors Tech, TEK. So they are all over a huge number of industries just in doing ceramic material formulations. 5,000 employees. It's an amazing story. And so I think, to anybody that's listening to the podcasts and minisodes that we do, there's a whole lot of publicly available information that people can go out and research and read and just see the evolution of a business from one person's passion for a product all the way through building a multifaceted conglomerate. And it happens on the back of family members that grow with the business, outside talent that's brought in to accelerate the business, outside investor money, mergers and acquisitions, and then ultimately being acquired themselves. So it's a full, rich spectrum of events in the building of a company like that.
So in reality, all of this TV drama that we see between shareholders and family members is all fictional, the majority of it. They all work towards a common interest that benefits everyone.
I think reality TV has to be entertaining, even if it's got a morbid side to it. People seem to be entertained more by clashes than by success. They just want the success story for the last 15 minutes at the end. Everything between start and end is about drama. That's just my opinion, but yeah.
No, makes sense. Also, being a single owner of a business brings its own traps. So we're talking about succession planning. Other than reliance on just one person, what other traps are there from your experience, from what you've seen?
Well, the one thing that comes to mind is, and again, you read about this in business materials, business publications, you have the activist shareholder. So let's say that you're a company, you started it in your spare room. It's very, very successful. It's growing tremendously. I mean, it's a real substantial business. you have the opportunity to go public. Now, as a publicly traded stock, anybody can buy your shares. And one day you wake up and you realize that, very quietly, very gradually, someone has been buying your shares to the point that they have a big enough majority to be an activist. And they don't like the way that you run your company. They don't like certain business elements that you're involved in. Now, all of a sudden, you've got this very noisy voice in the public market that can affect how you do things. That's one example. Another example that comes to mind is a business started by a founder. It still has large family shareholders, maybe the kids, and they brought in outside talent to grow the business. And then one day, one of the kids comes back into the picture because as a shareholder, they have a voice. They don't like the way you're running the company. And so that's a little different than a, disinterested activist shareholder. Now you've got a family member that's still involved that is going to stir up the pot. And because you're a public company, it has to get disclosed. Again, if you want to look at some of the stories around that, look at the Redstone family that are in telecom and media. Even though the founder is deceased at this point, his children are still making a lot of noise. And this is the Viacom company that owns CBS Corporation. So when you think of Viacom CBS, that's the parent company of Paramount Pictures, the film studio, and a whole bunch of cable TV networks. And so that's been a very dramatic story because they also had a succession drama where Sumner Redstone, prior to his death, was going through dementia. His daughter stepped in as vice chairman of the board. And even though she did not have a operating face to the business, she had a very, very powerful voice, to the point that at one point she removed the president and CEO and replaced that person with a completely different individual. So, there's so many examples of stories like this. And I actually enjoy using the Western brands because they're kind of household names around the world. Who hasn't gone to see a movie made by Paramount, right? Or who hasn't come to the US and watched television on cable network? And these businesses trace back to large conglomerates that have their own internal palace intrigue.
That's it for this minisode. Big thanks to Ed and to all of you for tuning in. If this sparked something, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and make sure you share it within your network. Got a question for Ed? Drop it within the comments. See you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions.